Hey, this is Alex Head, founder of Subtext Radio.
This is Subtext.
Please go ahead and click the like button and the subscribe button. It really helps us to reach new audiences and promote the artists that we work with. Hit like and hit subscribe.
You are listening to Subtext. Awakening 1. Political uprisings, revolutions, and de-colonisation.
They say silence is golden. Maybe that's why so many of my people struggling, enthralled by the sounds of the bass dropping, hypnotized by the vibration in the side view mirror, too busy contemplating the sound Henny makes when it's poured into a glass, styrofoam cup, hitting the sidewalk for dead homies, destiny calling. We can't hear over the noise, so we stop listening, distracted by the way her ass is clapping, punchlines when he rapping, and we don't hear the sound of the chains at our feet click clanking. 100,000 chains, 100,000 slaves, to the sounds of what maligns us. Gunshots in the night, helicopters with searchlights. We are deaf to the sounds that define us. Big mama's humming, papa getting up for work early in the morning. Poured into a glass, styrofoam cup, hitting the sidewalk for dead homies, destiny calling. We can't hear over the noise, so we stop listening, distracted by the way her ass is clapping, punchlines when he rapping, and we don't hear the sound of the chains at our feet click clanking. 100,000 chains, 100,000 slaves, to the sounds of what maligns us. Gunshots in the night, helicopters with searchlights. We are deaf to the sounds that define us. Big mama's humming, papa getting up for work early in the morning, laughing little girls playing hand clap games. Stevie Wonder had us wondering about love, listening to mama and daddy make love through the walls. We became hard of hearing, ears ringing, straining to hear soul clapping, our ancestors' souls crying out. We traded the spiritual for the off-color lyrical, smiling when we hear that trap music. We got used to hearing nigga, not brother, bitch instead of sister, driving on highways of information, no brakes, reckless. We know but don't understand. We hear but ain't listening to the heart of us. Stop dreaming the dreams that were the very best part of us. Delighted by cadence, disinterested in substance. We have become marionettes to twerk beats, disconnected from freedom songs and the rhythm of marching feet. Ain't no soldiers here, just corner boys who have lost their acute audio perception. Deaf by decision, controlled by airways of deception. Black noise.
We became hard of hearing, and we are deaf to the sounds that defines us. This is a great call for attention to sound with the voice of Tenesha the Wordsmith. It's a track called Black Noise by DJ Khalab, and I wanted to play this as an introduction to what will follow, with a speech by Martin Luther King titled Remaining Awake Through a Great Revolution, a speech he gave on the 31st of March 1968 at the National Cathedral in Washington, D.C. It's a call to end racism and a call for non-violence. I came across this in a book titled Not Dead but Sleeping by Anna Della Subin that was published by Triple Canopy in 2017. It's a great book if you don't know it, which is focused on cultural aspects of sleep, focused on the myth of the 7 sleepers, which appears in the Quran, and how it's been taken into different contexts, taken by Christianity and lots of other contexts and cultures across the world, especially in the Middle East. It also inspired plays, literature and sci-fi with the idea of waking up after a long sleep in a better world that will be free of inequality. Sleeping and being awake are both revolutionary acts. We can think of the Occupy movement with sleeping actions to occupy Wall Street, and sleep can also be seen as a kind of protest against production. But remaining awake through the revolution was also echoed in interviews during the Arab Spring. And in this section, I wanted to call upon this long tradition of awakening as a common metaphor for political movements, and in particular for colonization and de-colonisation, as I came across an editorial by theorist Achile Membe just a few weeks ago that was titled "To Come Out of the Long Night of Decolonisation" in relation to a recent book on French decolonisation. But I also saw that he has a new book coming out in English titled Out of the Dark Night, which I imagine is on the same topic that will come out just in a few months. So I just translated a short excerpt of this editorial, which I'm going to read before we hear Martin Luther King's speech. And after that, we'll jump into the sounds of the Sudanese Revolution by the collective Apocrypha. After colonization, France kept almost intact the mental apparatus that legitimized its domination and allowed herself to consciously brutalize the quote-unquote savages. Racist structures of thinking, of perception, and of behavior are resurfacing today, even though it is in different forms in the context of Islam, of the law against external signs of religion, of immigration, and the question of what is called national identity. To decolonize automatically means to deracialize. France needs to critically think about its history of colonization because it decolonized without decolonizing itself.
I need not pause to say how very delighted I am to be here this morning, and to have the opportunity of standing in this very great and significant pulpit. It is always a rich and rewarding experience to take a brief break from our day-to-day demands in the struggle for freedom and human dignity, and discuss the issues involved in that struggle with concerned friends of goodwill all over our nation. And certainly it is always a deep and meaningful experience to be in a worship service. And so, for many reasons, I'm happy to be here today. I would like to use as a subject from which to preach this morning, remaining awake through a great revolution. And the text for the morning is found in the book of Revelation. There are 2 passages there that I would like to quote. It's in the 16th chapter of that book. Behold, I make all things new. Former things are passed away. I'm sure that most of you have read that arresting little story from the pen of Washington Irving entitled Rip Van Winkle. The one thing that we usually remember about the story is that Rip Van Winkle slept 20 years. But that is another point in that little story that is almost always completely overlooked. It was a sign in the end from which Rip went up in the mountain for his long sleep. When Rip Van Winkle went up in the mountain, the sign had a picture of King George III of England. When he came down 20 years later, the sign had a picture of George Washington, the first President of the United States. And Rip Van Winkle looked up at the picture of George Washington, but in looking at the picture he was amazed. He was completely lost. He knew not who he was. And this reveals to us that the most striking thing about the story of Rip Van Winkle is not merely that Rip slept 20 years, but that he slept through a revolution. While he was peacefully snoring up in the mountain, a revolution was taking place that at points would change the course of history. And Rip knew nothing about it. He was asleep. Yes, he slept through a revolution. One of the great liabilities of life is that all too many people find themselves living amid a great period of social change, and yet they fail to develop the new attitudes, the new mental responses that the new situation demands. And they end up sleeping through a revolution. Now, there can be no gainsaying of the fact that the great revolution has taken place in the world today. In the sense it is a triple revolution. That is a technological revolution with the impact of automation and cybernation. Then that is a revolution in weaponry with the emergence of atomic and nuclear weapons of warfare. Then that is a human rights revolution with the freedom explosion that has taken place all over the world. Yes, we do live in a period where changes are taking place. And that is still a voice crying through the vista of time, saying, "Behold, I make all things new. Former things are passed away." Now, whenever anything new comes into history, it brings with it new challenges and new opportunities. And I would like to deal with the challenges that we face today as a result of this triple revolution that has taken place in the world today. First, we are challenged to develop a world perspective. No individual can live alone. No nation can live alone. And anyone who feels that he can live alone is sleeping through a revolution. The world in which we live is geographically one. The challenge that we face today is to make it one in terms of brotherhood. Now, it's true that the geographical oneness of this age has coming to be to a large extent through modern man's scientific ingenuity. Modern man, through his scientific genius, has been able to dwarf distance and place time in chains. And our jet planes have compressed into minutes distances that once took weeks and even months. All of this tells us that our world is a neighborhood. Through our scientific and technological genius, we have made of this world a neighborhood, and yet we have not had the ethical commitment to make of it a brotherhood. But somehow and in some way we've got to do this. We must all learn to live together as brothers, or we will all perish together as fools. We are tied together in the single garment of destiny, caught in an inescapable network of mutuality. And whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. For some strange reason, I can never be what I ought to be until you are what you ought to be. And you can never be what you ought to be until I am what I ought to be. This is the way God's universe is made. This is the way it is structured. John Donne caught it years ago and placed it in graphic terms. No man is an island in tie of itself. Every man is a piece of the continent, a part of the main. And he goes on toward the end to say, any man's death diminishes me because I am involved in mankind. Therefore never sin to know for whom the bell tolls. It tolls for thee. We must see this, believe this, and live by it if we are to remain awake through a great revolution. Secondly, we are challenged to eradicate the last vestiges of racial injustice from our nation. I must say this morning that racial injustice is still the black man's burden and the white man's shame. It is an unhappy truth that racism is a way of life for the vast majority of white Americans, spoken and unspoken, acknowledged and denied, subtle, and sometimes not so subtle. The disease of racism permeates and poisons a whole body politic. And I can see nothing more urgent than for America to work passionately and unrelentingly to get rid of the disease of racism. Something positive must be done. Everyone must share in the guilt, as individuals and as institutions. The government must certainly share the guilt. Individuals must share the guilt. Even the church must share the guilt. We must face the sad fact at 11 o'clock on Sunday morning when we stand to sing, "In Christ there is no east nor west." We stand in the most segregated hour of America. The hour has come for everybody and for all institutions, for the public sector and the private sector, to work to get rid of racism. Now, if we are to do it, we must honestly admit certain things and get rid of certain myths that have constantly been disseminated all over our nation. One is the myth of time. It is the notion that only time can solve the problem of racial injustice. And there are those who often sincerely say to the Negro and his allies in the white community, why don't you slow up? Stop pushing things so fast. Only time can solve the problem. And if you will just be nice and patient and continue to pray, in 100 or 200 years the problem will work itself out. Well, that is an answer to that myth. And it is that time is neutral. It can be used either constructively or destructively. And I'm sorry to say this morning that I'm absolutely convinced that the forces of ill will in our nation, the extreme rightists of our nation, the people on the wrong side, have used time much more effectively than the forces of goodwill. And it may well be that we will have to repent in this generation, not merely for the vitriolic words and the violent actions of the bad people, but for the appalling silence and indifference of the good people who sit around and say, wait on time. Somewhere we must come to see that human progress never rolls in on the wheels of inevitability. It comes through the tireless efforts and the persistent work of dedicated individuals who are willing to be co-workers with God. And without this hard work, time itself becomes an ally of the primitive forces of social stagnation. So we must help time and realize that the time is always ripe to do right.
You are listening to subtext.
Hi everyone, I'm Muhammad, and I hope everyone is doing okay during these hard times. My encounter with Apocrypha was during the Sudanese Revolution, which started in December 2018 until July 2019. We had a sit-in that lasted from the 6th of April to the 3rd of June in front of the Army HQ in Khartoum. On the 3rd of June, there was a massacre. Thousands of innocents have been killed, raped, and looted. The collective consists of 3 artists, Sudanese artists, Abdurrahman al-Nazir, Muhammad Mustafa, and Doshka. The collective for me acts as an audio library for what I have experienced on the streets. When I listen to these pieces, it takes me back to the smell of the tear gas, to the sound of the bullets, to the smell of the blood, and to the heat. The first piece is called Taranim al-Janjaweed, which means hymns of Janjaweed. And Janjaweed is a militia in Sudan. And if you translate it into English, it means a jinn, a devil on a horseback with a rifle. The second one is called Huliya, and it acts as a reminder, but also the intersection between Sufism, Islam, and the way they were participating in the revolution. I hope everyone will enjoy these pieces, and thanks very much for your time.
يدي اربط سوري اربط شيل فكر من دي لا برناس شيل فكر من دي برقبته فكر من دي برقبته فكر من دي فكر سريع فكر اربط خش هنا خش هنا خش هنا تعال خش اربط فوق ضغط شوي هاي أريك الوضع يا أخي الدكتور عندك كان اليوم وصار دخلوا مرة خلاص يا مانع باسية طلقة في اليد طلقة في اليد يا سطحية دي سطحية يا جماعة سكوا ساعة سكوا يا جماعة اهدوا يا جماعة
لا فوضى بعد اليوم
شايفين قدام الكريمة من الجنوب قدام عيوننا
لا فوضى بعد اليوم لا فوضى بعد اليوم
الناس دعم سريع يقتلوا فينا وكلنا هنا قاعدين مع السجون انا ما عارف دعم سريع
لا فوضى بعد اليوم
لا ما نقدر نروح طول اليوم ويا
حكومة تجي حكومة تقول تحكم بالحجي بالدجر الكجور مر العسكري كسر الجبور يوم باسم النبي تحكمك القبور تعرف يا الصبي مرة تلف تدور ولا تقول بريء أو تحرق بخور هم الفن
الليلة ما في كلام يتقال بس ذكريات القيادة العامة الناس اللي كانوا قاعدين الناس اللي كانوا متابعين فلاقي قطعة صغيرة كده مع المطرة دي في شارع بيت ختم قلت مشى الجو السمح ده دون ليل هادئة شوارع فاضية الجو سمح شديد بس سبحان الله بدون أي تخطيط لقيت نفسي فيه تحديدا قدام العمارة ديك العمارة التي لم تكتمل لكن اكتملت عندها أرواح ناس كتار انتهت عندها بسببها غدرا عين يمين شمال لسه ما زالت بعض المعالم قاعدة هناك مكتوب عزة تفعل بحوالي بيناتنا كارث والجاي ضد الداخليات كمية من المعالم أنا ما أعرف يعني بس لقيت نفسي بدون أي مقدمات الناس تتذكر يعني ناس كتار يعني احنا ذكرتنا الظروف بس ما وفاء ولا إخلاصا منا لكن ظرف خلى الزول
من الصورة اللي الجيش في أي حاجة يجيب معاه الشارع يجيب معاه
دي صورة الشهيد العظيم قعدوا طوال صورة الشهيد محمد علي ربنا يتقبلهم عندهم محجوب كمية من الصور على الحائط.
وانا شايف انه حرام علينا انه نسوي الشهيد راح لانه ممكن يروح بعد لانه حتى بيكون الشهيد ما راح لكن ما عاد.
واحدة من الشعارات المكتوبة ما عارف المكتوبة زول الكتابة حي ولا ميت لكن خلي عينك على الثورة خلي عينك على الثورة. خلي عينك على الثورة.
الناس الآن كله ضرب كثير في ناس
في كميتنا بتاعت منبه قلت كده يا ولاد
هنا النفق نحن الآن تحت النفق وكان في جمهورية على النفق. ربي متذكرين المشاهد دي متذكرين الموت والدم الشهداء والجرح متذكرين المواقف دي ولا ناسين؟
قوة كبيرة ضرب النار ضرب عصايات ناس وقعت ناس وقعت.
احنا كان بيحركنا الدم ده ذاته الدم حق القيادة اللي ورانا هسه دم الشهداء الأسي جينا مارين كنا الزول يكون عفص له مكان مقدس سقط فيه شهيد الآن هو مار. لكن إن كان في وصايا في مكتوبة هناك أنا كان عندي وصايا كثيرة دايرة أقولها لكن اختصرت الرسالة الوردي إنه خلي عينك على الثورة رغم إنه حقه ضايع لكن هو مبسوط فرحان ويقول في الشارع مدني حاسس إنه كده خلاص. حاول أطبطب الناس وقيادة على الموضوع ده خلي الدم السوداني يتسرق.
رغم بهاضة وعظمة فهدك إلا إنه الحياة ما يصير إلا إنه في ناس بيتمنوا عشان تختار الأرض النشفة.
أنا بعد الفترة الحرجة دي إنه ثورتنا ما في الاعتصام.
ناس من بعدك بعضها بعضك أرضها أرضك.
الشارع كوننا كنا دولة داخل دولة دينا نظر إلينا الشارع